And I screamed to my daughter, who was only 7 at the time, to call 911. And she called 911, and I injected him with his glucagon, and I rushed down to the ambulance. Luckily, we don't have a fire station too far from our home. And we're explaining to them what his condition is, why we need to go, and they took his sugar in the ambulance, and they said, well, he's 70, he's stable, you can take him. And I said, no, I can't. He's stable because I just injected him with glucagon. He needs to get to the hospital within the next 30 minutes because he's going to crash. And they were like, no, and we sat in my driveway arguing. My husband threatening to do God knows what to this woman if she didn't. And finally, she agreed to take us. When we got to the emergency room, once again, he's fine, talking, babbling like a baby, doing everything. And I'm trying to explain to them he's going to crash. In the midst of everything, they took his blood sugars and they admitted us to the regular floor. And I said, there's no way we can be in the regular floor. He needs to be on a D10 drip. And you need to call the endocrinologist. So it's the wee hours of the morning. We're just getting settled into the room about 4 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, the PICU crash team comes down. Someone didn't relay his numbers right, and before transferring us to the floor, his blood sugar was under 35. So they finally get us up to the PICU, and they have him hooked up to everything. He's on a D20 drip, and they can't figure out what's going on. So his endocrinologist comes in, and luckily he had some experience with children that had HI and children from CHOP, but they still hadn't had the genetic research back yet for his testing, so he couldn't say. So they started doing more tests again, put him on the D20 drip. He's still crashing. They increased his diazoxide a little bit. He still want to stay stable. They increased it more. He got stabilized. They put him on D50 with diazoxide, still want to stabilize. Then they got the bright idea to put an NG tube in and give him continuous feeds and see if he can maintain his sugars. Still want to do it. So then they left the NG tube in, and they increased it almost to the maximum dose of diazoxide. He still want to stabilize. They added octreotide injections, and he went up, of course, to like the 400s. But as he started to come down, he just kept crashing. He couldn't keep a sugar above 70 without having like his D50 like full blown going. So finally, I started demanding that they get us to CHOP because they weren't going to do anything else to my child. And someone had suggested that, well, you can go to CHOP and get the PET scan done, and if he needs the pancreatectomy, you can come back to the hospital here. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be there, why would I want to come back there? And I just didn't feel safe because I was still feeling lost. I didn't know completely what HI was, and it was just a really scary time. So they just said, well, we have to get to see if they'll take him at CHOP and things of that nature. And then the next morning, the nurse is waking me up telling me that I have to be ready because we're being med-flighted to CHOP that night. And it ended up being the next morning. And they med-flighted us to CHOP. And as soon as we got to CHOP, they took him off his octreotide. And we spent almost 2.5 months at CHOP. They took him off the octreotide, and then they fasted him. And even though they were really good about watching him during the fast, I was telling the nurse, I said, he's crashing. She said, oh, I just took his sugar, and he was he was 96. I said, no, he's crashing. She's like, he's fine, he's fine. I said, no, he's crashing. Please take his sugar. And she said, okay. And sure enough, she took his sugar, and he was already at 50. And by the time, and we still had to have him fast 2 more hours because after all the struggling of trying to get the blood drawing IV to work, he came back up to 80. So then they said, well, he's not through fasting because he's back up in the good range. So we went through that for 2 more hours until he finally crashed. And when they got the test sample that they do back, so then they ended up said we were going to get the PET scan, then the machine was down and they were going to send us home, and I just kind of fell into a heap of nerves. Like, I've been here almost 2 months and you said you were going to do the PET scan so you could tell me, and everyone was saying they believe it was focal because he responded so well to diazoxide, and now he's not. They thought that maybe the lesion had grown, other lesions had come on. So I'm like hoping, this was my hope that you could cure my son. And by a fluke, the day we were supposed to leave, the machine came back up and they said, we'll keep you on one night. And they did the PET scan. And no one ever came in to tell me the results. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, what are the results? And they were like, no one told you he's diffuse. And it was just like, okay. What does that mean? And they were like, oh, well, he's diffuse, there's nothing we really can do. And as long as he's managed on diazoxide, then he's okay. You can go home. And I'm like, well, was someone going to tell me this? Were you just going to send me home and me think it was like the genetic testing? I have to wait weeks for results. And that was really kind of it. And that was our experience at CHOP. And I did feel at home at CHOP because a lot of other parents were going through what Terelle went through, but he doesn't have it as bad. That's what I kept telling myself, is that there are other children who have HI, who have the G tubes, who have other things, and that God wouldn't give me anything that I couldn't handle. But I was still scared nonetheless. And it was just a really, really scary place to be. And every time since, we've tried to decrease his diazoxide and wean him off slowly, and he crashes. Dr. Stanley, we've done serum testing, we've done so many different tests on Terelle, and he's still such a puzzle that they can't figure out. We haven't found the origin of his HI. We don't know why he requires such a high dosage of the meds. If he outgrows, if he gains an ounce, then we start seeing lows, and then we have to, bring his medication up. He does have some delays from that 7-week period where he wasn't diagnosed. So he has speech therapy and occupational therapy. We have a nutritionist. He gets to eat Haagen-Dazs ice cream before bed, so he can kind of maintain his sugar. Sometimes we do use the Pediasures overnight. And it's just like another HI mother told me, the new normal. This is our new normal, and this is how we get through. I remember sitting there at CHOP some days just thinking, if you ever watch those specials on TV, like the St. Jude specials, like, you never know how the parents can deal with having all of this thrown in their lap, and then one day you're that parent. And you just kind of do, and some days are easier than others, and some days you feel like your whole world is just falling apart around you, and you don't know how you're going to get through, but you do. And I get through a lot because a lot of you guys make it easier, being able to talk through some of you and some of the support groups, talk to you on the phone. And I just really want to say we have to keep advocating for our children. No matter how much people may think we're being rude, we know our children best. We know what we have to do. I've gotten to the point where I almost had security arrest me because I threatened a doctor about what they were going to do to my child, treatment-wise. And luckily, once he finally read through his file, he realized that he was going to do more damage than good. So we just have to continue to kind of make people aware, let them know that it's not diabetes, because I feel like climbing the walls when somebody refers to my child as being a diabetic, because it's not. It's a completely different thing. And I'm just doing the best, because there are people out there who may be suffering from this, have children, have friends, and they just don't know. They have no idea what it may be. And like you said, we have to get it out there. They need to prick every child upon birth to make sure that they're sending children home healthy or with the treatment they need to kind of avoid some of the things that we've had to go through. So I want to say thank you to Angela for all her selfless work that she does to raise awareness, because she's our voice when we have no voice. She's our strength when we have no strength. And I know she feels like that because she doesn't have a child with HI, that she doesn't know what we go through. But it's very relieving to know that when I'm so tired and I can't do it anymore, that there's somebody who's gonna be there to let another mother know that there's hope, that there's help. And it's really refreshing, because I was so alone before I met Angela. Before I met Elvia, so many nights I spent on the phone. I never thought that any other person would care as much as they have to get me through some of the nights I've been through with Terelle, and I'm just thankful. I'm also thankful for my daughter, who's a huge help with him, very understanding to have such a sick sibling, and thankful to Dad, my husband, because I know it's not easy, and they just make life a little bit easier. So thank you everybody for letting me speak, and I wish everyone the best on their journeys.